In May of 1999, a 14-year-old girl walked into a Hong Kong police station. She was unkempt, her clothes were disheveled, and her eyes were wide with pure panic. She looked like a runaway, just another trouble kid on the streets. But when she sat down across from the detectives, she didn't ask for food. She didn't ask for a place to sleep. Instead, she shook violently and whispered a sentence that made the detectives freeze. Quote, "The ghost of a woman I helped kill is chasing me. She won't leave me alone." At first, the police didn't know what to think. Was this girl just hallucinating from drugs? Was she mentally ill? But as she kept talking, her voice cracking with terror, she started giving specific details. She talked about an apartment on Granville Road. She talked about a month of screams. And she talked about a popular innocent cartoon doll sitting on a shelf. The police decided to check it out, thinking it might be a hoax. They had no idea they were about to walk into one of the most sickening crime scenes in human history. But before we open the door to that apartment, we need to talk about the young woman the little girl was so afraid of, because she wasn't a ghost. She was a mother, and her name was Fan Mai. She was 23 years old, and the world had never been kind to her. When she was just a baby, her parents abandoned her. She grew up in a strict orphanage home, and the moment she turned 15, they kicked her out because of an age rule. With no family, no money, and no home, she fell into the darkest corners of the city, dealing with drug addiction and street prostitution just to survive. In 1996, she married a fellow addict who we're going to name N. It was a deeply broken, toxic relationship. Neighbors in their crowded apartment building constantly reported hearing sounds of screaming, breaking glass, and brutal domestic quarrels echoing through the tin walls. Fan was trapped in a circle of poverty and violence. But in November of 1998, everything changed. Fan gave birth to a baby boy after 2 years of her marriage. The moment she held her son, a switch flipped in her heart. She decided she was done with the streets. She completely quit using drugs, packed her bags, left her abusive husband, and walked away from her past. But because she had no school degrees, she took a grueling, low paying job as a karaoke club hostess. She worked until her feet bled, doing everything she could just to buy milk, diapers, and a safe future for her baby. She was a young mom fighting like hell to protect her child. The nightmare began over a tiny mistake born out of pure financial desperation. Struggling to buy supplies for her baby, Fan stole a wallet from one of her regular club clients. His name was Shan Maliok, and he was a dangerous gang member. The wallet had about 4,000 Hong Kong currency inside, roughly around 500 US dollars. Shan found out instantly. Fan panicked, realizing what she had done, and returned every single penny that she took from Shan Maliok. But Shan didn't care. He demanded a penalty fee of an extra $10,000. When Fan begged for more time, Shan gathered his gang: 21-year-old Wei 26-year-old Shin, and that 14-year-old girl Ming Fong. On March 17, 1999, they ambushed Fan on the street, snatched her, and dragged her away. They locked her in a third-floor apartment on Granville Road. It was a bustling, crowded shopping district. Right outside the window, thousands of tourists and shoppers were laughing and walking by, completely unaware of the absolute evil happening just a few feet away. For an entire month, the gang turned that apartment into a torture chamber. Initially, they tried to force her back into the brothel to earn the money, but when her body and spirit resisted, the gang devolved into pure sadism. They turned everyday household objects into weapons to break her. They bound Fan tightly with heavy electrical cords and hung her from apartment ceiling, turning her into a human punching bag. They took turns beating her relentlessly. Court records show that Waylon alone kicked her in the face and head over 50 times in a single night. When they weren't using their fists, they beat her with thick iron pipes, hitting her repeatedly across her limbs and torso. They poured burning wax and melted plastic over her skin until she was covered in deep chemical burns and could no longer stand. They took raw chili flakes, pepper, and forcefully rubbed them into her bleeding open wounds. Over these 4 weeks, they subjected her to continuous sexual assault and degradation. They starved her completely, denying her basic food and water, and forced her to ingest human waste just to keep her barely alive so the torment could continue. It makes you ask a deep, unsettling psychological question. How does a human being look at a helpless, crying young mother and choose to lose their humanity completely? How do multiple people join in on this without a single one of them stopping to say this is wrong? Through all the pain, the killers forced Fan to smile and tell them that she enjoyed the abuse. But her body couldn't hold on forever. Around April 14th, 1999, Fan Mai's heart finally stopped. She passed away on the floor while her captors were out. When the gang found her body, they didn't panic out of guilt. They panicked out of selfishness. To destroy the evidence, they dragged her body into a bathroom, dismembered it, and boiled her remains in large kitchen pots to mask the smell of decay. They stuffed most of her into garbage bags and scattered them across public trash bins all over Hong Kong. But the ringleader, Shan Manleok, wanted a trophy. He took a large mermaid-themed Hello Kitty plush doll, ripped out the stuffing, and shoved Fan's skull inside. They sewed the cartoon doll back up and placed it on a shelf in that same living room like a sick piece of decor. For a month, they lived with that doll. But guilt works in strange ways, especially in the mind of a child. The 14-year-old girl, Ming Fong, couldn't take it anymore. She started having terrifying nightmares, dreaming that Fan's ghost was hunting her down for revenge. That psychological terror is what drove her, unkept and broken, straight to the police station. When the police finally raided that apartment, the horror became real. There, sitting on the shelf, was the smiling Hello Kitty doll holding the tragic remains of Fan Mai. The trial took place in late 2000, and it ended in a way that makes your blood boil. The killers had destroyed her body so completely, medical examiners could not scientifically prove exactly how Fan had died. The high-priced defense lawyers argued that the prosecution couldn't prove the gang intended to kill her, claiming she might have just died from a random drug overdose during the captivity. Because of this legal loophole, the jury did not convict them of murder. Instead, they found them guilty of manslaughter, killing without intent, and forced imprisonment. The judges sentenced Shan Manleok, Waylon, and Shin to life in prison, but he gave them a massive gift. They were allowed to apply for parole after just 20 years. Even worse, Shin appealed his sentence and the court actually cut his time down to just 18 years. He walked completely free out of a prison gate in 2011. Let that sink in. A man who participated in a month of sadistic torture and mutilation was allowed back into the streets just after a decade. And it surprises absolutely no one that he wasn't rehabilitated, because in 2002, Shin was arrested yet again, this time for a violent, indecent assault on a helpless 10-year-old child. The system let a monster go and another child paid the price. But what about the baby boy? The little infant France sacrificed her entire life to save. He was only 5 years old when his mother was taken from the world. He was left with an abusive father who was completely unfit to raise him. But during the raid on that horrific apartment, detectives found one small beautiful item inside the refrigerator, a tiny silver necklace that belonged to Fan. The police kept it safe throughout the trial, and when the verdicts were final, the detectives did something heartbreakingly kind. They handed that small silver necklace over to Fan's infant son. It was the only physical piece of his mother he would ever own. To protect the boy from the media and the awful stigma of this case, social services stepped in. They took him away from his father, wiped his legal name completely clean, gave him a new identity, and moved him across the ocean to Singapore. Today, that baby boy is a grown man in his late 20s. He's living a safe, normal, quiet life. He may not remember her face, but he carries her protection with him every single day. Fan Mai didn't get the future she wanted, but through her sacrifice, her son got the safety she died trying to give him.